You're listening to Art Affairs, episode 50. Today I'll be talking to Esao Andrews. So my name's Michael Faith, and this is Art Affairs. Art Affairs is my attempt at shining a spotlight on the many wonderful people that make up this amazing art community, featuring conversations with artists, gallerists, curators, telling their stories. You can dig through previous episodes, complete with show notes, at artaffairs.podcast.com, but the best way to stay plugged in is to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're really enjoying the show and want to help support what I'm doing here in an even bigger way, check out the Art Affairs Patreon. Not only does it give you an opportunity to help keep the show going, but there are several community-oriented benefits as well, like getting early access to episodes and suggesting questions for upcoming guests. You can find all the information about that at patreon.com/artaffairs. You can also connect with the show on Instagram and Facebook at Art Affairs Podcast. All right, so today's guest is one of my personal favorite artists and someone I'm fortunate to be able to call a friend, Esao Andrews. Esao's work is often compared to the world of fairy tales, but with a darker and slightly more haunted slant. We talk about his unique blending of haunted mystery and tender warmth, as well as how he first started working with the band Circa Survive, his more recent exploration into mural work, and a whole lot more. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Esao Andrews. Esao, welcome to the show, man. I'm so stoked to have you on. I'm glad we could finally do this.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it's been a long time seeing you. But yeah, it's really nice to talk to you. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I really enjoy the episodes I've been listening to, your previous guests.
Awesome. Yeah, and you're the 2-year anniversary guest too. So the fact that you could be a part of that really means a lot to me personally. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, on Halloween. So.
On Halloween, right.
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's start with your background. And I know that anybody that's kind of followed you for a while would know that you grew up in Mesa, Arizona, which is not far from Phoenix. So what was that area like where you grew up at the time that you grew up?
So yeah, at the time I grew up. So it's right. I grew up right on the border of where Mesa's huge. It's a massive city. So right on the edge of it, there's this other town that goes closer to the mountains called Apache Junction. So I was just right on the border, right there, East Mesa, and it was just dirt roads, up until my mom passed away recently. Yeah, the neighborhood still has paved roads, but no street lights, septic tanks. It's still, but everything around it's really built up. There's a big high school and neighborhoods all over. But when I was growing up, there was just raw desert as far as you could see. And I was just rode my dirt bikes or bicycles in the dirt and collected bugs, and it was pretty isolating. It was awesome out there. I love the desert nature.
And I know your dad was a school teacher. I think he was in the Air Force before that, but as you were kind of growing up, he was a school teacher. What level of school did he teach?
He taught first grade on the Sackatone Indian Reservation.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And what about mom? What did she do?
She washed dishes at a seafood restaurant and then worked as a maid at a Motel 6.
Okay. So, did you have much exposure to the arts as a kid?
Yeah, that is a cool outlier. So because my dad taught at the elementary school, I think that the process, it wasn't so standardized because it was on a reservation. He had a ton of school supplies. So we had all these maybe secondhand, or I don't know where they all came from, but just libraries of picture books and history books geared towards kids and science anthologies and dictionary things. So I kind of had this this whole room full of a lot of interesting children's books. And then And then there was a shed in the back that had all the craft supplies.
Oh, nice.
Like a lot of cool, like just, wooden dowels and even tiny motors. I used to build a lot of like little contraptions. And there wasn't really, besides just going out to the desert or riding bikes, there wasn't really much else to do out there and being like 1,000 degrees outside.
So is that what first got you interested in creating yourself?
I guess so. Back as far as I could remember, I was always interested in just like making things. I was, it was something I really focused on. I think even before I even started going to school.
What kind of stuff did you like to make? Like what sparked your creativity growing up?
Yeah, I don't know if this is the exact one, but this is the example. Like, so I remember learning cursive as a kid, and I'd like draw my name in cursive and then fold the paper in half and then like rub it with a pencil. And so when you open it up, it kind of has this weird symmetrical tree looking thing, but I would fold it in half and then I would make them into insects. Like, cause if you can imagine like this kind of overlapping cursive mass. And then I just remember like doing that and then like, oh, we'll do my name too. And then I had all these adults asking me to do their name like that. And I think the praise or something, or like the attention, I got the bug, it's like, or whatever. Yeah.
Well, it's so cool that you were already kind of seeing past the kind of prescribed intention of the forms and seeing them as things beyond what they were originally intended. Even at that age, like that's an impressive kind of leap to make, to see those kind of as forms instead of words,
Yeah, I haven't really thought about that thing until just now you asked me that.
And so I know that as, kind of growing up, another thing that you got really involved with the skate community. So like, tell me about that. How did you first get into skateboarding and how big of a presence was that in your life as a kid?
Oh, so, yeah, that was my life for a long time. So, they started paving the roads in the neighborhood, and my friend Chadwick Uptain, he's a painter now. So he's one of my oldest friends. I've known him since I was like 4. He built a half pipe in his backyard and he got really into skateboarding. And, yeah. And so like years later when we became like teenagers, we kind of, I bought a skateboard from him, like a hand-me-down one, and then I just started kind of tagging along because he had like went a different direction, like was hanging out with skateboarders, and I don't know what I was doing. I think I was playing cello or something at the time, just like doing other things. And then I was like, I'm going to start skateboarding. And then, yeah, like from there, it was really interesting because even though we lived so far out in the middle of nowhere, we ended up like, going to like skate events and other things in different towns. Maybe like older friends drove us there, and that was like the beginning. And then we just had this like good core group of friends, and every single one of us lived in a different town, went to different schools, but we all talk all the time still. And we're like in our 40s now. And, and a couple of them like, Eric Ellington and, like Scott Kopelman, Shane Heil, these skateboarder guys, they kept going and they made it into, the skateboard world and on certain degrees became professional.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
And I know that you actually designed your first skateboard in high school, like for a local skate shop. Is that like, how did that happen?
Yeah. How did you know that? Yeah. Yeah. There was a skateboard company called Balance that was like a local thing. And some of us were, sponsored by, it was like a shop sponsor / like, it was all in cahoots. There was let me think. There was a shop called Cutting Edge. And I was kind of, some of our friends were all like sponsored by them. And then my friend Aaron started this company called Balance, or it was called Turtle. And then there's all these different companies, we're all like young people just trying to get other people to manufacture stuff. And so, yeah, the first board I ever did was, it was like the Capitol building. And it was like, on the inside, you could see the tops of the trees, and they were all made out of money. And then the outside of it was like this like dirty wall with all these bums and stuff. So what's changed?
Oh, that's
what's
awesome.
new?
And I mean, not very long after that, you did, while you were in college, you also did stuff for Baker and Deathwish, and you've also obviously done a lot since then with them as well. How did you connect with those guys?
Yeah. The Eric Ellington was he rode for the team and was part owner. So
okay,
that was the connection right there.
Very cool. And so I know also in high school you were like, you'd already gotten obsessed with oil painting. Like you had some class where there was some expectation where you had 10 to 15 pieces and you ended up with like 100, which I mean speaks to kind of the level of commitment and motivation that you already had at that young age. So like, why do you think you had already gotten so motivated that young?
I don't know. I think about that a lot. Like why? Yeah, like I don't know where you got that information. I guess I've told that before, but yeah, it was interesting, like the way in high school, my situation was set up where I was able to do my homework during lunchtime for my first, second, and third period classes. And then my fourth and fifth period classes, I convinced my art teacher if I could do independent study, and I would just finish up my homework for my fourth and fifth period in art class in another room, so I could just work all night on my artwork. So I didn't have homework ever. And then, and I would just like paint or till midnight, like every day. And then, towards the end, it was just something like we needed 10 to 12 pieces for a portfolio to get into, to get these like kind of elective credits towards college. There were these portfolio reviews that they would have. I don't know exactly what it was called, but they were like these national portfolio things. And so it was a lot to choose from. I don't really know why. I just was really into it.
How did you first like get exposed to oil painting specifically? Like, how did you learn that?
My brother built airplane models. And so he had a whole cache of Testors enamel paints. And that was how I learned. This is the worst thing to paint on with, because it's like painting with like nail polish or something. And that's what I was trying to like learn how to mix colors with those on paper. And I still have a lot of that stuff. But yeah, that was like the introduction to painting. And then that was pretty much what I was using. And then I had a little bit of acrylic and tempera, a lot of just like the cheapest art supplies you could get.
Sure. So you ultimately, when you graduated, you ended up going to SVA in New York. I guess why did you choose SVA? What was it about that school and specifically that attracted you?
It was in New York City. I'd never been on the East Coast at all. This was kind of a weird gamble. Even at the time, because I was wanted to go there. And I was getting all these brochures in the mail from different art schools. But the big thing was, and I don't remember his name, but a recruiter came to Red Mountain High School and showed this portfolio thing and was just like, this is the school. I don't know why he came to that school way out in the middle of nowhere. But he did, and I was there in that class, and he did this really cool slideshow and really sold the school. And I talked to him after the presentation and showed him my thing, and he said he would be in touch. And then months later, with the portfolio review, I had applied for the Silas H. Rhodes Scholarship, and I don't know, maybe that guy gave the connection. I think he did, but I got one, and so I had a scholarship to go to that school, and it wasn't a full one, but it was I think half the tuition, and it was the only school I applied to, which is like so just reckless,
Right.
reckless. It was like, I'm going there, or I'm just gonna go to community college out here, because it was too late to apply to any of the other ones at the time.
So what was it like living in New York for the first time? Like, was that a big change of pace for you?
Oh, yeah. I didn't know anybody. And I remember just getting to the dorms, and the dorm room was tiny. I could stand on one foot and like touch my toe in my hand and like, touch both ends of the walls. But yeah, that was like my first impression of how tiny the rooms were. But it was just overwhelming, the cultural. I just remember like these parades happening and just being like, whoa, New York City's crazy. We're in the Big Apple. And just walking around that city it's the best city. I can't wait to go back there.
And your focus at SVA was illustration. So I guess why illustration, and like what was your career goal at that point? What did you want to do with a degree in illustration?
I thought that, my work was already kind of illustrative. Like all the stuff I'd been working on up until that point. But I think it was just this idea of like I have a job, and maybe those kind of were side by side the whole time. I remember in high school, like, well, what do you want to be when I grow up? And I was like, yeah, medical illustrator,
Okay.
I think, did Tiffany Bozick, did she say the same thing? I can't remember, or maybe it was Renee Fred in one of your other things mentioned it. And I think that was just a thing, like you were like into craft, like kind of the renderedness of art making. I was like, medical illustrator. But I think that kind of was, that was kind of the thing. And the school was just known for it. And, my work was very illustrative going in there. So.
And while you were there, I know that, and you've talked about this before, you had a ton of talented people that were going to SVA like at the same time. I mean, even people that you are still like your contemporary peers today and still friends with. Mm-hmm. Did that help you, I guess, grow as an artist, having so many other talented people around you?
That was probably the most important thing of the whole experience. Like it was crucial, like that renaissance that was happening. And I think it was happening in other schools, like maybe like Art Center in Pasadena and a couple other places. But it definitely at SVA around 96 to 2001 or two, like there was a definite like renaissance going on there, because you got I'm going to leave people out, but you got James Jean, Tomer Hanukkah, these guys were just in my class. There was this guy, Dan DeSantos, Mu Pan, Kenichi Hoshine, Nicholas Uribe. I know Nathan Fox was in the master's program around the time. There's just a lot of people. Oh my God, I'm gonna be forgetting people. There was a lot of people going on there.
And so having all of those people kind of to bounce ideas off of and sort of compete with was a big growing opportunity for you?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we hung out together outside of class, and we had this thing called Meat House Comics. That our friend Chris had put there was a big group of us, and we all pitched in money, and we published these comics. And because like the cartooning illustration department was kind of this side by side, and so a lot of our friends were comic book people, and so that's what I don't do. I was never good at storytelling, like sequential stuff, but I tried. And same with like James. It's like we're more like just image, like a standalone image, but we were there, and we're all like trying to put things together. So we were like together all the time.
Didn't you also work on like doing Flash animation around the same time while you were still attending SVA? Like, how did you get into that?
Tomer. Okay. It was an Israeli children's educational website called Alfie.com. Some of your people that might be listening to this, there was like a games page that was kind of around the .com boom. It was just this big grid of just free games that you could just play if you wanted to play solitaire or like I don't know, just anything. But so we were a part of like the interactive storytelling part of the website. So we were just doing these kind of like simple stories where it was like click and figure out like very simple Flash puzzles. But Tomer got us the job there. James worked there too, and Mu Pan worked there also. And
did you already know Flash at that point, or did you kind of learn on the job, like as you
learned on the job?
Okay,
yeah,
it's interesting. One of my previous guests, Johnny Command Z, had talked a little bit about his experience at Disney Interactive when they were first adopting Flash. So he was part of that on the complete other side of the country, like the rise of Flash. Did you enjoy like animation in like as an art form, as a medium? Do you think you'd ever want to explore something like that again?
Yeah. Because of that, what I learned at Alfie.com, like I had put together this really elaborate website as my portfolio site. I don't know if you had ever seen it because it's been long defunct, but it was all these animated environments. Everything was animated, and it first started out with this desert scene, and you'd click on like a cactus, it would go inside the cactus, and there would be all these other things and all these hidden like rooms, and it would check the time on your computer. So throughout the day, it would turn into evening and night. And somewhere hiding in there was like my portfolio of paintings. But every single thing, like you would click the next button and a spider would come up and eat, like I was just having fun doing these like tiny little like standalone animations and putting them in this environment. It's a shame that Flash is no longer, because now it's just right. It's just lost to time, and you can't even like. I have an old laptop. I guess I could kind of look at it from there, like an old like beta VHS tape. But over the years, I kept refining it and making it smoother and changing like the themes, and I would just kind of do overhauls occasionally, and the animated parts kept getting smaller and then pushed to the side until it was just like this little sliver of animation, like an animated navigation menu, and then then social media and everything just kind of chucked it all out the window.
So you graduated in 2000 with a BFA, but you continued to live in New York for a while after that. Had that just sort of become like home for you at that point? Yeah.
I had was fortunate enough to get a cheap apartment in Williamsburg, and when I moved into that place, it was like $670, and it just became it was a 1-bedroom, so I like slept in the bedroom, and then the rest of the apartment was my studio.
Okay.
And I just kept it there, and it was so cheap because, gosh, that cheap. Those are like, in the middle of nowhere prices. Even back then. I just stayed there till 2012, and just doing the art thing there. Yeah, I was there for 9/11. That was crazy.
Oh, wow, that's crazy. While you were living there in the first couple of years after graduating, did you continue doing that Flash animation work, or did you just dive 100% into your art?
I didn't do any more like animation after that. It was just like after that job got dissolved by the .com burst. I just like started doing skateboard designs and other just random illustration stuff. But I never went to it. And now it's like, well, now it doesn't matter anymore. But like, the technology in the computer world is constantly updating and changing. Yeah. And so even like taking a break for just a couple of years, it's just like, it was a totally different program. So,
right. So in these early years, like right after college, how did you go about developing what would ultimately become your style or your artistic voice? Was it something like that you consciously put thought and effort towards, or was it something that sort of organically established over time?
Yeah, like there wasn't anything too specific. Like, I wanted to make things that kind of were a combination of something creepy, something cute, something sad and endearing, just like this kind of try to do all of it. And I have my inspirations. A lot of them were from, my friends I was going to school with. And then there's like people like, Hayao Miyazaki, or any kind of big cartoons, animators. Al Columbia was a huge influence. I love his comic work and it's just his vision. And he gets creepy. He's like in his own category with that. And and so, like, as for just like very specific stylistic stuff, only like subtle things, but like I think one of the things that I kind of as like a device, a stylistic device, is kind of started where the band Circus Survive. Like I had already done this balloon image that was used for their album artwork. It's like their famous one. It's like a balloon with like a girl whose head's on fire who's like lighting the thing, and like the pattern on it where it had these kind of like teardrop shaped things, and I use that motif a lot, if that's, or like that iconography or whatever you call it. I think because it became such a popular image in my world, like in my career, that I think I like kind of have been reusing it just to like force it as like something that's like looks like mine. Man, it's really tough trying to explain. I guess
Sure.
I wish I could just say it like I was teaching a class, like this is how you do it.
No, I totally get that. But so like right after college, you didn't waste any time at all getting started showing. Like you had your first solo show in 2003, like 3 years after you graduated at Fuse Gallery in New York. How did you connect with those and I guess start building some of those like gallery relationships in New York?
So Eric Foss, who owned Fuse Gallery, we had some close connections. He was from Arizona. He was from Scottsdale. He moved to New York about a year before me, and we reconnected out there. We had a bunch of similar friends, and he saw my artwork. And he's like, "Oh, dude, you know, we should talk." And so that scene in Manhattan at the Lit Lounge Fuse Gallery, that was like a very cool place to hang out at. And so, yeah, you got me a show with John Jesse. He's like this singer for Nausea. So me and him did a show, and that's the show you're talking about. And I think right before that, though, I did this kind of show that was it was like in the same space, but it was with Tristan Eaton.
Oh, nice.
And Dr. Revolt. This is a strange combo. And then, me, like goth me, like whatever I was doing at the time. But, it's like Tristan went to SVA for, I think a semester or a year, but we became friends back then. And so that was the beginning. Before that, I was just showing in some coffee shops and some like establishments like that. It was a weird time, like that .com era, the early 2000s. There was a lot of like people throwing parties and had like warehouses, and there was a lot of DIY kind of gallery stuff going on. And but yeah, the Lit Lounge was my very first, like, this is a gallery.
Yeah. And then 5 years after that, I guess, is when you first started showing at Jonathan Levine, who you showed with, for your free times after that. And then a year after that, you started showing with ThinkSpace, who you've obviously developed a good relationship with over the years. Has it been important to you and to your career to have these kind of strong gallery relationships, like the synergy there? Has that been beneficial?
Yeah. I do like having like my hand in a bunch of different things. Like as an illustrator, like I look at it like I just want to do like, or I don't want to, but like, doing illustration work and then gallery work. It's like I would be scared to do either of them only. And so, it's like, oh, I'm going to do this for now while I'm doing these other things. But yeah, I mean, God, to be able to display your work in person, I think it's really important for somebody like me. Like, I want people to like look at the stuff close and in a nice setting. And yeah, all those guys were great. Jonathan and Andrew.
How did you first connect with Andrew and ultimately make the jump over to the West Coast?
He contacted me. This is stuff that was happening so long ago. And I'm trying to think of like if I did any group shows before having a solo show with him. I don't know. I think I went straight into like a solo show with him. But I was like around. I was doing group shows here and there. I think I had done something at Copro Gallery around that time, just like a couple pieces here and there. And so I mean that was my first show. Oh my God, this is like putting me on the spot. Like all this stuff. Like I was like really busy back then. Like
sure,
where I was just
you're doing a lot.
And like and like Rock LaRue also. Around that time, it was just like I think I had a solo show with Rock LaRue and Jonathan Levine the same year. Like,
how did you manage to keep that pace?
Just staying up late and painting's pretty small.
Yeah. And so you ultimately moved to LA, like you said, in 2012. What prompted that move?
Well, I'd been in New York for 16 years at the time. I had to move out of that really sweet spot, and I'd moved to Greenpoint, which was really awesome. But each time I kept having to move, and it just got more and more expensive. And I was just like, like the art scene has always been on the West Coast, like this kind of like cartoonish illustrative artwork. And I had a lot of friends out here from Arizona growing up, and a lot of people from New York had already moved out to the West Coast. And then it would be closer to my mom, who's in Arizona still. And so there was a lot of things where it was like, it's time. Like, yeah.
Awesome. And so you mentioned Circa Survive, and I wanted to spend a little bit of time on that specifically, because that's obviously been a big part of your commercial career. And I really love, so you started working with them in 2005 with their first album. And I just love the fact that it's what you guys have done has managed to build a very kind of a visual continuity between all of their like entire discography, which is not common. Like I think the only band that I could really think of, and I'm sure there's more than that, but the one that I have experience with that had something similar was KMFDM, with like Bruta doing all of the covers for all of their albums. So I guess, how did you first connect with that group and like build that relationship?
Yeah, I feel really fortunate because it's not normal. I feel like, it's really been a really cool experience. Those guys are all great. And they're still trucking along and evolving, and I'm just like honored to be part of their group, kind of. So I think this was maybe 2003 or something. Brendan from the band had been familiar with my work at some point, and so my friend Melissa, she worked at this a record label. I think it was called Gigantic in New York, and one of her coworkers had seen my stuff and sent it over to him, and he's like, "Oh, I've seen that guy's work before. Let's get in touch." And so I just got an email from them and saying like, "Hey, we're this band. Here's our demo. We like your work. What do you think?" And I listened to their demo, and I was like, "Oh, this is great. Like, I don't really care what the pay is. Like, I want to be part of it." I had no idea anything about it. And so that was the thing. And I remember they came through, they played a show at the Knitting Factory, and I went and met them. And then they gave me some ideas for the cover, just like the name and the song lyrics. And that was kind of the process. And I was like reading those. I was like, okay, I'm going to take these lyrics and do these sketches and see what they like. And that's kind of been the process for most of the album artwork.
Okay, so you get sort of a peek at what the album will ultimately become, lyrics, some general concepts, and then you build the work off of that?
Yeah.
And so when you first signed up for that first record and got working, did you or they have any idea that it would become every album? Or was it just, I'm just signing up for one, and then it just, with subsequent records, it sort of became that?
Yeah, well, I thought it was going to be one. And then the second album, came around. I was like, oh, do you have anything else? Like, because I really went over the top. Like, I didn't really get paid much, but that first album, I did like the front cover, and then like the actual disc, the CD, and then the CD tray, and then a 5-page gatefold.
Oh, wow.
It's really crude stuff, but I it's a lot of stuff. It's not just the one image.
Yeah.
And I think maybe just kind of overdoing it. They asked me again, and then their second album was the one with the balloon image, the On Letting Go. And I think maybe like the success of that, that they just kept asking me, and I was like, yeah, sure, man.
Well, and since then, I mean, you have people tattooing that image all over. Like, how do you feel about, I guess, your work being displayed and seen and people experiencing it in all these different ways that maybe you didn't originally conceive?
Yeah, that is not normal either. I realize that. Yeah, I think it's super cool. In the beginning, it was a little weird because somebody's reinterpreting your artwork, and some people are just better than others, and so you're like, oh, this is cool, and some of it's just way better. It's like, this is amazing, Yeah, but I mean, a lot of it, I know, doesn't have to do with me. It has to do with the way music, attaches to people's formative years, and it becomes even more meaningful. And like, I'm just, that visual counterpart to their music, and I do think it's great, but I do acknowledge that it's like, it's like more about the music.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't want to minimize your contribution to that, though, because like, obviously you created a visual experience that joins that music in a way that resonates with people, right?
Yeah. And that's like the not normal part about it. I think it's so cool. Yeah, it's very cool. I feel lucky,
And I mean, I really like just the fact that another part of it that I like is that it exposes people to fine art that may have not otherwise found your work in other forms, and now they're seeing, getting involved and excited about the fine art side of your career too.
Yeah. I get people like, emailing me sometimes about that, and it's fantastic.
Awesome. So let's dive back into your personal self-directed work. And we talked a little bit about your what you're trying to go for, and obviously the work that you make fits firmly into the surrealism category, and I think it's often compared, at least in spirit, to like fairy tales. Mm-hmm. And I kind of like to think about it like, if I'm trying to articulate to other people what your style kind of involves, it's like the feeling of a fairy tale, but with some shadows, like a little bit,
sure.
A little haunted, a little mysterious, but also like warm and tender and like sweethearted. And I really love like the complexity of the emotions that evokes, at least in me. So that's one of the things that kind of attracts me to that. But have fairy tales been like an inspiration for you? Do you feel that as a kid, or even into like your adulthood, has that been a source of inspiration for you?
Yeah. I think with a lot of people it is. I think that I gravitate towards those because it's really easy to make analogies with it, because it's all like fantastical stuff, but it's all familiar. And so I feel like I'm trying to take things that are familiar visually and kind of re-scramble them so they might say something different, and people make it a little ambiguous enough so people see that there's something familiar. Yeah, I'm using like the fairy tales and other kind of just familiar imagery to repurpose to have like, this darker meaning.
I mean, I think that makes it more real, right? Because the real world is not all roses and bright stuff. There's some darkness in the world, and
sure.
Adding that darkness to those fairy tales, I think, makes it more, I guess, close to people's real world experiences,
Yeah. Like I'm like wanting to, like, I think a lot of the subject matter, it's like I'm romanticizing like isolation and, kind of like making something wholesome out of, darkness and like, loneliness. And
do you think that your work is, narrative in some form? You said earlier you weren't really good at like sequential storytelling, but are you at least trying to tell a story with the single images?
Like a feeling, like a moment, like capturing the feeling of a moment. I think
I like the way that I sort of like to think about it. I guess another way that I like to think about it is like, I have very vivid dreams, but I don't remember them very well. I'll wake up and I'll see a glimpse of that dream in my head. And if I'm intentional at trying to remember that glimpse, then maybe I'll hold on to that one glimpse. But I'll know there's a bigger story behind that one glimpse. And I know that there's a world behind that I just can't quite grasp. But there's that one fleeting image that I can hold on to in that dream world. And that's sort of how I feel, I guess, about the scenes that you kind of capture. It's like, there's a bigger world behind all of these things, but you get this one little piece of it,
Oh, good. Thanks. Like, yeah, no, that's how it's like, that's what I'm trying to go for. Like, there is a bigger world out there.
Do you tend to develop that bigger world in your head, even if you're not articulating it in your piece? Does it help you to build that image, knowing what the bigger world is behind it?
Yeah. To an extent, I for sure. Like, I'm trying to foreshadow something that's outside of the scene.
And do you think that they all participate in the same world, like across all the pieces? Are they part of the same? Is that important to you or no?
No, it's not. No. I suppose some of them could coexist for sure, but I do try to look at each piece kind of as its own like separate standalone moment. Yeah, and I want to like focus on that even more. Like, I was just like looking at a lot of my work. I just had that book come out, and I'm like flipping through it, and if like you zoom out, like almost everything feels like it's looking the same. Like I want to like, how do I make each image like stand alone even more? And maybe with color choices and different compositions. I don't know, but
you mentioned earlier the balloon motif that started with the Circus Survive, and your kind of desire to introduce that, along the way throughout your career. And you said forcing it, but I never really saw it as forcing it. But you do have several like common thematic elements, like balloons or violent seas, that you'll return to from time to time. Is that, I guess, are there special meanings to those things? Do these represent specific feelings that you're trying to communicate as sort of a visual language?
Yeah. I think that, a lot of my work is very escapist. Like growing up in the desert and spending my young adulthood in New York, like I just, just open oceans are just something that's, I'm not really that familiar with. And so, I draw those or paint those a lot because it's something that's not really part of my world. It's like this other world that I'm not too familiar with. And with the balloon stuff, just like that floating, like mysterious thing, it's I look at them kind of like, maybe they represent, spirits or like just some kind of, not to be too corny about it, but like just they can kind of be transformed into a lot of things. Like I look at them almost like these, they have intention. They're like animals. Most of the time when I'm drawing them, they don't have baskets on them. They're like these free floating things that, where the cords are like tentacles, like a squid or like a octopus or something like that.
So it's like sentient in some way?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I always, whenever I'm doing them, there's something very, like they're up to something.
Okay.
Maybe,
Very cool. And so I guess, how have you seen, some of these things change over the course of your career? Like has your work and the stories that you're telling changed as your own interests and perspective has changed?
It's definitely evolved a lot. I think that a lot of my work isn't as dark as it used to be. I think that it's not as shocking. I feel like my earlier stuff, I used to kind of go for things that were a little more grotesque and, trying to walk that line of what is grotesque and endearing or wholesome, And, I kind of want to go back to that, I think.
Do you think there's something in your life that motivated that change? Like, do you think there's was there something that happened within your life or that you can kind of introspect looking back that might have caused that evolution?
Oh, maybe feeling like yeah, am I forcing this too much? Being grotesque, like maybe trying to get a wider audience. These are all critical things. I used to do a lot more portraits. I used to do a lot more portraits of girls a long time ago. And I've been in a very long relationship. Maybe that's not good. Maybe my, to do that anymore. I don't know. They're all kind of jokes, but like, I think about the older stuff a lot, and I think about how am I going to pivot in the future. That's been a thing that during this whole COVID thing, and just having a lot of time to think about, like, what am I doing?
So you think you go back and explore some of those themes again?
Yeah, well, I want to start diversifying, like, my output. Like, I feel like I had done that most of my earlier career. Like, it was pretty diverse, and but now I look at my stuff and it's all very like surreal scenes, oil paintings, and I want to explore just like doing abstract stuff, and how is that going to look that fits.
So when you're working out ideas for like a new piece, where are those ideas usually born? Is it in your sketchbook? Because I know you have a pretty rigorous kind of sketchbook routine. Or do you have like other brainstorming techniques that you use?
That's a good one. There's like a lot of visual, like kind of overlap, like interpreting, just visuals and stuff. Like a lot of my ideas will come from like, all right, so like I'll just give an example of something. We're talking about, like a family unit. And I'm like thinking this idea, like, what is like, your generic family? It's like, parents and a kid is like, this generic family thing. And I was like thinking like, what if they're all joined at the head and they were all like kind of leaning into one another for support? Because, like pyramids are like kind of a very solid structure.
Right.
And, I was like, oh, if they're all joined at the head and like, like the guy, their mom, and then the kid on like a high chair. So they're all the same height, they're all leaning into one another at the head. And, just thinking about like, oh, the lockdown and stuff, and the pod, like a tripod. And I was like, oh, I could do the painting and just call it pod. And like, that is your stable structure. It's like that kind of thought process of like where the word and like the structure and the like kind of looking at those things and reinterpreting them in a visual sense. And one of the other, and I keep this list on my phone that's like becoming into the hundreds of these kind of ideas. And I got to start painting looser so I can get these out into the world. Like the other thing, just another example, and this was something that I talked to the Circus Survive guys about on their podcast, but I thought it was something that, because I had come up with it like kind of when I was talking with them about like one of those like floaty inner tube. Like I was looking at some boots, some green rubber boots online. Not that I was going to buy them, I just had come across them and I was like, and I was thinking about like that photograph of Nessie, the Loch Ness monster, and how like the head is coming out of the water. It's kind of shaped like a boot in a way, just like the top of like a plesiosaur or like a whatever. And I just was thinking about those like little floaty inner tube things where it's like the green inner tube with little like dinosaur head. Do you know? And they're made out of oil. And I was like, oh, that would be an interesting image to see one of those things on top of like the La Brea tar pits, just like bubbling oil. And, because it is made out of like dinosaur juice.
Right.
And it is like these things that are familiar, and they're being introduced to things that are they're connected to, but it's like this vague way of like, that's how I'm looking at things all the time. Like just, it's hard to explain, but as I'm explaining, you can get like how there's a connection between all those things.
Well, to make those like leaps of thought from this thing's made of oil to and it looks like a dinosaur too. Well, oil is really the juice of dinosaurs, like making those connections.
And it's like the surface of a swimming pool too, because it's like oil, so all these things are all like connected in this visual way and historical way. And I think a lot of the way I look at stuff is like that.
Yeah. No, that's super interesting. So how do you, I guess, capture, because word lists don't necessarily always capture that whole concept. Do you describe all of these in more detail in like your journal, or how are you kind of working through them in your head?
I think they mostly just stay in my head, or I'll just have these notes that are really rough. Because, I can't write anything. God, when I try to type out something, like, I got a lot of good premises, but like, I wish I could like articulate them in a better way. This is what I got, I guess.
So when you're working on like a full body of work, like for a solo show, do you typically develop an overarching theme for the show first and then kind of work within those boundaries? Or do you just start working and let it organically kind of develop into something you maybe identify later? Something I identify later. Like, so I have these standalone ideas and I'll do a couple. And then through those ideas, I might have something like, I can try to fit in another painting that kind of bridges those two. It's not that clear, just like everything else is unclear, but like, that's how I usually work. I usually have like a couple of paintings and then the rest of them are thought of during that time. And those are like usually the ideas that I'm excited about. A lot of times I'll like think of an idea and then kind of stop what I'm doing. It's like, this is an idea I want to get out, and then return to the older stuff, or just abandon the older stuff. There's a lot of that stuff going on. And sometimes I wish I could just do like not stick figure paint, but like something super atmospheric and gestural to like get the concepts out there. Yeah. So once you do get excited about an idea, what's like your next step at developing that composition, like figuring out the composition?
I'll just do a drawing of it, and then I'll scan it in and possibly do some Photoshop stuff to kind of fine tune the composition. Lately, I've been building maquettes.
Even for a while, like that's not a new thing, because I remember seeing like in some studio video tours that you did a while back of like paper houses that you had built to kind of resemble the house that you wanted to paint. And even in Mesa, there was a little bit of like the stump for one of the paintings that you did with the house on top of it. And the horse carriage that you used as an example, like just models of things that you use. Is that, I guess, do you like using that as a device instead of just to get your kind of head around the space rather than using like photo reference or something?
Yeah, well, with the photo reference, if you're not taking it yourself, it's like you don't have control over it. I do like building these things. And they're very sloppy. They're usually made out of like paper and tape and just, they're just there for the kind of the lighting reference. And, when things are made out of paper, the wrinkles and like the imperfections or something I like to embellish anyways. I use them for like kind of the lighting reference. And there's like part of me that's like, should I go in the other direction? To make things more simple, where I can get away with, not having, real perspective and all that stuff. Cause it's like at some point, things get so rendered to the point where, and I like craft, I like, renderedness. Mm-hmm. But I don't want the work to be about that.
Right on.
Makes it easier to have a reference, just makes it easier for me.
Yeah. And then do you do that like for all of your paintings, or is it just certain ones where you're trying to figure stuff out?
Oh, just certain ones. Okay. Most of the time I'm just making it up or using some rough photo reference. Like when I was in school, I did a lot of figure drawing and life drawing. So I got to get, that's something you got to keep up all the time. But I did it a lot to have kind of a general knowledge of, light and shadow. I'm not that good at it, but it's okay, because it's like that's not what I'm going for in my work, to have like perfect reference.
So once you've started on the painting itself, do you tend to focus on that one entirely until it's completely finished, before you kind of go on to the next one, or do you work on multiple pieces at once to sort of, change things up?
Yeah, I work on a few at a time usually because it's oils, so things are drying at different times.
Okay.
And yeah, I don't do too many layers, but enough to where it's like, well, I got to wait a couple days.
Sure. So that context switching doesn't bother you at all?
No. No, it is weird though. If I take a break from painting, it's like, I feel like, oh, did I forget how to paint? Like, and like resetting up and like, yeah, like that kind of happens a lot where it's like, I'm looking at some like whatever is like almost finished on the easel. It's like, I don't know if did I forget how to do this? It's yeah, I don't know why everything's, I guess everything when it's a clean slate and you're starting,
Intimidating a little bit.
Yeah, still this whole time, it still is. Especially like when there's more weight to things like whatever I'm doing now, it's like, I want to retain an audience, it's like, how do I keep people excited? So it just seems like the newer stuff, it's like, oh man, am I like, how is it going to be more interesting than previous stuff?
I feel like that would be hard, I almost feel like if I was in that spot, I'd have to let that go. But I know that's easier said than done. Like, how do you kind of set that aside so it doesn't cloud your, creativity, but then also meet those expectations,
Yeah. It's not something I think about all the time, but yeah, like I feel like it's becoming it's a mental block is happening because I'm like, because right now, yeah, it's like, I want to do a lot of different stuff, and I am right now. But should I be worried about how it's going to be received? And it's like I don't want to get stuck in like doing greatest hits, and become like a caricature of my old self. That's something I think about a lot.
So switching gears a little bit, I wanted to talk to you about some of the mural work that you've been doing over the last few years. I think 2015 was when you first started doing murals. Mm-hmm. So I guess tell me about that. How did you first get into mural painting? And is that something you'd been wanting to do and you just had an opportunity to in recent years? Yeah.
Tristan Eaton was the one who just totally did that. He asked me if I wanted to collaborate with him on a thing at Static Medium, Static Medium.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing, maybe a couple days or weeks before that, like he had a studio over on 7th Street in downtown LA, and I thought the building was going to be demolished or something. So he was spray painting in there, and I went on the roof and like spray painted just testing out, because I'd never really spray painted before. So just, did some doodles inside the stairwell there. And then right from there, it was like, okay, I'm going to do pieces of this thing. And he's very professional at it, and then it was just, through Tristan and James, Gene, got the connection to participate in powwow. And so after I did that thing, like the next week, it was just like, like painting something with Aaron Horkey.
Yeah. So like, what was those first, big experiences like learning? I mean, I guess in the case of Tristan, he's had years and years and years of experience doing this. So you're kind of working with somebody who has a ton of experience alongside you. And then at powwow, I mean, the entire event is filled with people that have had a ton of experience doing it. So I guess what was that like, quote unquote, learning the ropes, alongside so many experienced people?
Oh man, it was so intense. Like, and there's like this kind of, with graffiti street art thing, there is this kind of territorialness thing. So it was very intimidating. Like, the walls were all spread out throughout the neighborhood in Hawaii. And so we were, actual painting, we were pretty isolated. Just me and Aaron were just like working on the wall. But yeah, I was just kind of focused, like got there really early, stayed really late every day, just trying to like catch up. And it was the way I paint in my oil paintings is very blotchy and dotty and like, and so I was able to kind of mix or translate that into spray paint by just kind of like going, spraying like little, like this messy kind of spottiness. Cause like doing something like, let's say Tristan, like super clean lines. No, I can't do that. I have no can control at all. Like, yeah, that takes a lot of practice, but it just happens that like my oil paintings, I can kind of mimic it by just kind of, fizzing out the can and, in random areas on the wall. But yeah, I know I can't really spray paint.
Were there aspects of it that, like in the early, stages of you kind of getting comfortable with it that you didn't anticipate? Like things that surprised you that while you were learning, you didn't expect?
Yeah. Like, you got to watch your stuff. People steal your stuff.
Oh, oh no.
Yeah. Like just like,
that sucks.
Cause you're just out on the street and, I've gotten things, nothing major taken, but I think that's just like a normal thing. Like you have, and it kind of, the people that are gravitating towards like, oh, there's somebody doing a mural or something, brings over like, piques the interest of people that might want to steal free can or a backpack or something. And that's, it's kind of funny, but, the other thing is just, people that come by and are interested in what you're doing and the kind of the socialness of it is really interesting. I like it. I thought it was really cool the handful of times I've painted things.
And that piece that you did with Aaron was particularly cool. I mean, I just love the concept of how, above the water, you're using the sea line as sort of a divider so that, you're creating everything above the water, Aaron's doing everything below it, which I think is such a great concept. And then you guys executed it so well. How much of that did you guys kind of work out and figure out beforehand versus just figuring it out as you go?
Oh, so I think I did the boat. Like it was Aaron's idea to do this like line. So I just did the boat part up at the top and then he did the rest, man. He's in a category of his own. That guy's like the best. So he sketched out the bottom part. And then when we got there, it's like, okay, we'll do a couple things here and there that like kind of like, I'll do some like jellyfish down the bottom and he did some like other like manta rays or something up at the top. And so, I just did the boat, it's like he did the design, like that nice curve, that kind of like, it's a good design. He's like the best designer too.
Awesome. And then like just the following year after that, you guys all went on a trip with David Cho to Morocco and doing all kinds of these events with people that, I mean, obviously he has a long history with street art. Yeah. So with like each of these like occasions where you're getting exposure to experienced street artists doing things their way, are these things that you kind of accumulated all these different types of techniques by watching how other people are using them and kind of adding them to your own toolbox? Is that?
Yeah. I learned a lot from, just watching all these people. I mean, these people that, I've been around, like, they're like the best in this sphere of, it's crazy, like thinking about it. I have no idea how it all happened. Yeah, those trips to Cambodia, Morocco, Fiji. God, like this is like some of the best trips I've ever been on. Some of the only trips I've been on, but like, I mean, they were just really over the top. David Cho's his real world is such a fantasy, and that was really cool to be a part of it.
So, like, I guess in the end, after all of these experiences, and you've obviously done several more on your own since then, do you like painting murals? Is it something that you, in public art in general, is it like something that you like to get up to? It's
really scary. It's the day before, like just, I mean, my heart's just racing for days before, like prepping. I'm not used to it still. I do like the physical work of it. It really feels at the end of the day like feels almost like you did construction work or something. You know, you're just like out in the sun, you're climbing up and down, moving things constantly. And I really like that aspect of it. It feels really satisfying. And then, you know, in the end, it's like, you know, you look back on it and it's like a lot bigger than, you know, like, it's like, wow, this is really satisfying to see something so big.
Yeah.
But it is scary. Like each time, a mural project comes up, like I'm hesitant to say yes because it makes me so nervous. But you just got to say yes and do it. And yeah, it's always been if it hasn't been worth it, it's been like such a cool experience, you know, to like learn like, oh, that was so hard, you know, like there's rain, like sometimes rain happens or like all sorts of problem solving. It is like this constant problem solving, which is satisfying too, to kind of conquer it.
Do you think you'll continue to do more of them?
Yeah. Right now, I hate to say it, but like my shoulder's all screwed up, so we'll see what happens. I think I tore my rotator cuff or something.
Oh,
so
no.
I know.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, it's been months. But I think I can do smaller ones. I don't know. The one that I did at the Long Beach Convention Center, I don't know if I can do something like that big in a while.
So before we get into what you have coming up, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your last show, the big, you know, mid-career retrospective that you had a couple years ago, Petrichor, which I was fortunate enough to attend and am super grateful to have had that opportunity. It was actually the second to last trip that I made before COVID like canceled all the things in the next year. Yeah. I guess Aaron's show was like technically the last trip that I made. And both of those were just incredible experiences. I guess starting at the beginning, like how was that idea first born to do a mid-career retrospective? Like, was that something that you had approached Andrew with the idea for, or he came to you, or how did
Andrew came to me about it. It was like the perfect opportunity for it. My hometown, you know, accumulated enough work. Yeah, I mean, Andrew Hosner set it all up with the Mesa Art Center, and I just had to collect all the work, and you know, thanks for loaning your stuff. Like the idea behind the name of it, you know, was kind of like I heard of that word, you know, not too many years ago. Petrichor, I think it's a kind of a new word. The smell of rain or wet stone. And when I came across that word, I was like, oh yeah, I know that exact smell growing up in the desert. So I thought it was very appropriate to title it because I hadn't really been back to Arizona since I moved out in 1996. And so to come back like that, you know, it's like this very sweet memory, you know, what Arizona was.
I love that name, just the many layers that it has, because, you know, it has that kind of the meaning about it's the smell of, you know, arid ground when you know, new rain or smell of rain on arid ground, and often kind of associated with like new growth or new possibilities, stuff like that. Yeah. And then of course, obviously just the dry ground and its relationship to Arizona is meaningful. But is that sort of what that title was signaling for you? Is the sort of like turning a page, new beginnings, like that sort of a thing? Yeah.
It like that show was also a book release, and it had like pretty much all of my paintings, the majority of them all collected, even most of the ones that were in the new paintings in the show. So it was like this big chapter closer.
And was it always conceived to be in Mesa, like from the very start? Was that part of the whole pitch?
Yeah. I think that, you know, I thought of the name after it was like, you know, let's do this kind of this show that just fills the whole museum space.
What was what was that process like? So for people that aren't familiar, half the show was previous works that you had done throughout the course of your career that you collected from the people that own them, and then the other half was brand new work that you created, developed specifically for that show. So what was like that process of picking out which pieces from your previous shows that should go into the show, and then actually going about collecting all of those from their collectors?
Oh man, yeah, it was a little daunting. I wanted to try to get all of the Circus Survive album artwork stuff. That was something that was like, people that like my work are very familiar with those. So, and those were all pretty much all in the same place. Like most of them the band had. So that was easy to take care of. The other pieces, it was just kind of asking around to a lot of people and anybody who wanted to just, put it in there. There was a lot of space to fill in. Like, my artwork isn't really that big. So just, we were just asking anybody.
Awesome. And so for the new work, as you were kind of creating the new works for the show, were you considering how they would pair with the older works? Was that something that you was going through your head at all, or was it kind of isolated?
Yeah, I wasn't really worried about that stuff. I do like I want the paintings to kind of stand by themselves, like each one you stand in front of it, it's like, it has its own like story, its own setting, environment, world. And so, besides the album artwork stuff, the other stuff was pretty randomly scattered throughout, just what kind of like looked good next to one another.
I know that you were, and I saw like promo videos that Andrew had put out leading up to the show, where you had built out miniatures of like the space that it was going to be shown in, so that you
yeah
like a small little which I think obviously what we were talking about earlier about you building maquettes to kind of, so is that something you do for all your shows, where you'll actually diagram the whole space out physically so that you can see what pairs well with one another?
I was gonna say no, but I guess I do that. But I don't like, I haven't, I guess I was the only one where I like cut it out of foam core or whatever. But in past shows, I'll kind of have a big long strip and kind of like, and I'll do a little tiny JPEG and I'll like, the frame looks like this, and make a little fake frame.
Nice.
And then kind of like space them around. I guess I do that. That's funny. Yeah.
I love that.
I was about to deny that. Oh, I do that. I do that. Yeah.
So let's talk about what you've been up to lately and what you have coming up. What's like been your main focus this year, and what does like 2022 look like for you?
All right. I just the other day was just talking to Andrew. We don't have a date, but he has that new space, new Think Space thing, and I'm going to talk to him about a show date. Not as soon as next year, but maybe the next year. I have some ideas, and I want to introduce some new types of work. I've been taking this 3D class with Martin Whitfuth, and doing some 3D sculpting is something that I've been just like trying to do and for years, and I'm interested in making sculptures and stuff. And it's just been, I just haven't been able to find like really structured time. So it's like, here, I'm taking a class. I'm going to be forced to do homework every week. And it's great, man. It is, cool. So, so I'm doing that, and I have some, ideas for some interesting, weird products.
Nice.
And I wonder if I should share any of them. I have this idea. I think I've mentioned it before in like maybe a written interview or something, but I want to do sundials, I like the idea of sundials. And so, it was, after some research, it's like basically you have a disc. There's two different types of sundials, but you have one that's called an equatorial one, where it's just like a circle with a perpendicular pipe that goes up, and you face the pipe towards north, and and it's very fixed. It's a very fixed thing. And then you have the one that you can kind of imagine your like iconic sundial, where it's also a disc, but it has like the little like protractor looking thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that one, depending on where it is on the planet, has like everything has to kind of be readjusted. But it also faces north. So with the equatorial one, I was thinking like, oh, it'd be interesting to like have, and I don't know if this is the right idea, but like, just think of like, let's say like a guy crouched down with a shield, and so he has like a round shield with the things on it. And then there's like arrows or spears, and there's like a main one in the center, right?
Wow.
And so depending on where you are, there's like a adjustable hinge on his shoulder. So you can move it to the degree you need it, and then just have the main spear facing north.
Oh, wow.
And so it'd be like a portable one that you could kind of readjust no matter where you are, on the planet, or at least like, I think at least in the northern hemisphere or something. I don't know. I got to like still fine tune it, but it's like, I don't want to do weird functional stuff like that. And so I have a lot of like these ideas that are just kind of like, well, yeah, that might be an idea. And I'm just saying it out there because I've had the idea for years and I haven't done it yet. So I'm just going to put it out there in the world, because in case I don't do it, at least it's just out there, the idea.
Yeah. Well, and so is that what some of these 3D printing classes is kind of setting you up for, is to design some of these types of like functional art? Yeah.
That's one aspect of it. Martin's teaching the program called Blender, and it's really robust. It has all like the fixings of like, translucent hair. You can do all the stuff that looks like a Pixar cartoon, and it does have animation features. The class I'm taking is just for basically like fancy maquette making, where you build these things in a virtual world and you can pose them, with a skeleton underneath. And so, yeah, for reference for paintings, that's another thing. Everybody's talking about NFTs. I don't know. Yeah. I was like, I don't know. I'm not against them, but we'll see when this comes out. We'll see if they're still around.
Right. So I guess anything else that you'd like to put on people's radars? I know that you just had a print release, but any other like events or things that you'd want people to know about?
Right now, no. I'm in chrysalis phase. I'm incubating. I have a lot of these things that I'm working on and just doing like commissions and other stuff in the background. But yeah, my schedule is full, but there's nothing that's publicly like scheduled in. So I don't know what to tell people out there except that see me online or something.
Stay tuned.
Yeah. Like I feel like I've always been saying like, oh, I'm going to have like my store open with different things, and I'm here to say it again. I'm going to have a store at some point, because it's like and now, since I don't have a bunch of like big pressing deadlines, which has been like most of my career. I'm excited to just like work on my own, little projects. And yeah, I just want to like make things in porcelain and metal and stuff like that. That's the kind of stuff that you got to look out for.
Awesome. And so, for people that are interested in staying up to date with all those things as they start to happen, what's the best place for them to find you online?
Oh, I guess it would be Instagram still somehow.
Yeah.
But I updated my website recently, and I think that's probably the smart thing to do, is just do the website and like mailing list stuff, because who knows what's going to be happening with like the social media stuff. It's really made sharing stuff really easy and lazy, and when things change on those platforms, it's like, uh-oh, where do I go?
Yeah. And now Facebook is Meta and all these other social media things happening. So,
yeah. I feel fortunate that like, my career was already getting a foothold before all these these things existed. So I feel lucky in that sense. But yeah, those social media things they feel tired right now. I feel like a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah.
I'm reluctant to say I feel that way too. I'm just not paying attention as much. But if you're listening to this, try to pay attention to stuff. Don't be like me,
I mean, I think it's hard. I mean, it's hard in general. It's exhausting and it's overwhelming. If you're trying to create things to share with people, the algorithms are working against you, and it's just such a hard time to be a part of that world, I think.
Yeah.
Last question, and this is something that I like to ask everybody.
Okay.
Who is one artist that you'd like to see me have on the show?
Ooh. Oh man, just one? I don't know. Do you know Tomer?
I don't. No, I've never met him. I know his work, but I've never met him at all.
I'll try to get him to do something, because he's a classmate of mine, and he's really inspiring, and he's really articulate. He'd be a really good interview. And same with Nicholas Uribe.
Nice.
Those guys really know how to talk what they're talking about. Like, they just know, like, they'd be really good interviews. I don't know if you've ever heard either of those guys speak, but I'm going to, outside of this, after this, I'm going to try to, you got to say yes to this thing.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate it. Yeah, I like their work, both of them. I've never, like I said, I've just never met them before, so that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Bill, Esau, thank you so much for doing the show, man. It really means a lot that you're able to do that and be a part of it. And I'm just personally grateful to have you as a friend and to have your artwork in my life. I think both of those things have enriched my experience in the community and, just in general. So thank you.
Oh, man, I appreciate that. And yeah, I'm really glad that I know you. And I'm glad that we're friends too, because and it's good to talk to you, because it's been a long time.
Been a while. Yeah. Looking forward to the next time when COVID's not a thing that everybody is fighting, that we can actually hang out and have a cup of coffee.
Yeah, well, before, like, the last time I had talked to you, it was during that Texas blizzard or cold snap. Everything okay with your pipes?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's, so that was February. That I came out okay. My water went off for several days. I did keep power though, which was super fortunate because a lot of people did not. And so I'm grateful that I was able to have at least power, even though that my water was out. But that week was like hell for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. What I'm afraid of is what happens this February. It seems like these events are happening more and more often, and we're all going to be impacted by them, like, going forward now. So I don't know what to expect in 2022 February.
Yeah.
But yeah, fortunately I came out okay. My house came out okay. I couldn't ask for more than that, I guess.
All right,
man, we'll cut there. So that's it for this episode of Art Affairs. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Esau, and I am so stoked to have been able to have him as the anniversary guest. I am such a huge fan of his work. I love those complex feelings that I mentioned that his work has always evoked for me. So beautifully blending the darkness and the mystery with sweetness and tenderness and warmth. I was also pretty blown away by how he described the way that he comes up with his ideas, or the way that his brain sort of connects all of these, seemingly different concepts and things, and just makes these kind of logical leaps from one to the other, seeing the similarities in ways that most people probably wouldn't, or at least I know I couldn't. But once he makes that connection for you, it's like this aha, and then you get it. I think that's so cool. I'd never talked to him about that before. I thought that was fascinating. I'm really excited to hear that he's, given some thought towards what his next show is going to be. It'll be super interesting to see, what other kinds of art that he brings to the table between now and then. With his explorations into 3D printing and his, desire to create more, physical and functional art, like that sundial that he mentioned, as well as just wanting to, go more abstract. I'm eager to see, how all of that develops and what all he ultimately creates. Following the mid-career retrospective in 2019, this will be the first show of effectively the second part of his career. And with Petrichor being that signal that, new growth is about to take place, this next show will be an early look at what that new growth is going to look like for Esao. And, a sign at what's to come next. So thanks again to Esao for joining me today, and thank you for checking out the show. I'm truly grateful for your support. With it being the anniversary episode, I want to give a special thank you to each of the amazing people that have joined the show's Patreon. Stephanie, Melinda, Amr, Rosie, Dan, Aaron, Jess, Sarah, Mike, Jeremy, Keith, Seth, John. Thank you guys so much for believing in the show as much as you do. It really means a lot. It would be harder to keep the show going without your support. And for those of you who aren't on the Patreon, if you'd like to know more about it, you can find all the details at patreon.com/artaffairs. As always, you can contact me through my website at artaffairs.podcast.com or on Instagram at artaffairs.podcast. So until next time, be good to yourself and be good to each other.
Thank you.